I'm Nicholas, 28, and my mom was planning to make me watch my golden child brother's 5 kids over Christmas. Before I tell you about what my aunt read out loud on the family video call that made every single person gasp, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. To understand how a family gets to the point of a complete meltdown on national holidays, you have to look at the dining room table. Our Thanksgiving table was a battlefield disguised as a Norman Rockwell painting. My mother, Linda, spent 3 days cooking, cleaning, and staging the house in suburban Virginia, so it looked like a magazine cover. But beneath the smell of roasted turkey and cinnamon apples, there was a heavy, suffocating expectation. I was sitting at the edge of the table closest to the kitchen. That's my designated spot. I'm the one who jumps up to grab the extra napkins, the dropped forks, the spilled gravy. It's what I do. I work as an EMT, a paramedic. My entire life is built around responding to emergencies, fixing things, and making sure everyone else is breathing fine before I check my own pulse. My family knew this, and they weaponized it. Across from me sat my older brother, Kevin. Kevin is 33, a corporate vice president of something vague but highly lucrative, and the undisputed golden child of the family. Next to him was his wife, Tina, perfectly manicured, sipping a glass of expensive red wine, and running laps around our chairs, screaming at the top of their lungs, were their 5 children. 5 kids under the age of 8. Lily, Ethan, Noah, and the twins Mason and Harper. The noise was deafening. Felt like being inside a jet engine. My dad, Robert, was quietly eating his mashed potatoes at the head of the table. He's a good man, but a quiet one. He mastered the art of being invisible 28 years ago to avoid my mother's wrath. He kept his head down, chewing slowly, letting the chaos wash over him. Midway through the meal, my mother stood up. She tapped her wine glass with a butter knife. The sharp, clinking sound cut through the screaming kids. She had this wide, beaming smile on her face, the kind of smile a politician wears right before they raise your taxes. "Everyone, listen up," she announced, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "I've been doing some thinking about Christmas this year. Kevin and Tina, you two work so hard. You have 5 beautiful children, and you deserve a real break. I know you've been talking about that couple's resort in the mountains." Kevin leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms with a smug grin. "Yeah, we really need it, Mom. It's been a crazy year." "Well," my mother continued, turning her gaze directly toward me. The smile didn't reach her eyes. "Here is the plan. You two are going to book that trip. Nicholas will stay here at the house with the kids. Just like always." She didn't ask. She didn't phrase it as a question. It was an executive order. Before I could even process the audacity of the statement, Tina reached into her designer handbag. She pulled out a thick, laminated piece of paper and slid it across the polished oak table. It stopped right next to my dinner plate. "Oh, good," Tina said, not even looking me in the eye. "I already printed the allergy list and the sleep schedules. Ethan needs his nebulizer at exactly 8 p.m., and the twins are going through a biting phase, so watch your ankles." I stared at the laminated sheet. It was color-coded. She had color-coded my unpaid labor. My jaw clenched so tight my teeth ached. A hot wave of anger rushed up my neck. I looked around the table. Kevin was cutting his turkey. My dad was suddenly very interested in his dinner roll. Nobody flinched. Nobody saw a problem with this. "Actually," I said, my voice louder than I intended. The room went silent. Even the kids stopped screaming for a split second. "I can't do that. I have plans this Christmas." Every fork paused in midair. Kevin looked up, an annoyed expression crossing his face, as if I had just insulted his favorite sports team. My mother let out a sharp, dismissive laugh. It was a cold, cutting sound. "Plans?" she scoffed. "What plans? Nicholas, please. You don't have a family of your own anyway. So, it works out perfectly." I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. "You don't have a family of your own." I was 28. I worked 60-hour weeks pulling people out of wrecked cars and holding the hands of strangers taking their last breaths. I was exhausted, lonely, and trying my best to build a life. But to her, because I didn't have a wife and a mortgage, my time was worthless. My existence was only valuable if I was serving Kevin. Before I could respond, Kevin reached into his pocket and tossed something onto the table. It landed with a heavy, metallic clatter right next to the gravy boat. A set of car keys. Attached to them was a shiny leather keychain with the Porsche crest. "Just picked up the Mekong yesterday," Kevin smirked, leaning back. "Twin turbo. It's a beast." My mother clapped her hands together in delight. "Oh, Kevin, that's wonderful. You deserve it. We were so happy to help out." I froze. Help out? I looked at my dad, who quickly averted his eyes. My parents, who constantly complained about inflation and the cost of groceries, who told me they couldn't afford to help me with my community college loans years ago, had just handed Kevin a massive down payment for a luxury sports car. A Porsche. While they demanded I spend my 1 week of vacation changing his kids' dirty diapers for free so he could go to a spa. I didn't scream. I didn't flip the table. I slowly folded my napkin, placed it next to my plate, and stood up. "I'm going to head out," I said quietly. "Nicholas, sit down, we haven't had pie," my mother commanded. "I'm full," I replied. I walked out of the front door into the freezing November night. I got into my 10-year-old Honda Civic. The heater took 5 minutes to kick in. I sat in the dark, my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I pulled out my phone and opened my email. There it was. The confirmation receipt. 2 tickets to the Outer Banks, departing December 23rd. I stared at the screen for a long time. I was not going to cancel it. The fire had been lit. The drive back to my small apartment took 40 minutes, and every mile felt like a heavy weight pressing down on my chest. I lived in a tiny, 1-bedroom place above a noisy commercial bakery. My alarm went off at 4:30 a.m. most mornings. My life was a relentless cycle of coffee, sirens, blood, and charting. My salary as an EMT was barely enough to cover rent, utilities, and groceries. There was no trust fund. There was no grand inheritance waiting for me. I later found out that whatever inheritance my grandparents left behind went straight into a massive college fund for Kevin. I got a pat on the back and a good luck. When I walked into my apartment, I threw my keys on the counter and slumped onto the worn-out sofa. I pulled out a small blue notebook from my coffee table drawer. This was my ledger. For the past 6 months, I had documented every single extra night shift I picked up. Every time I ate cheap instant noodles instead of ordering takeout. Every time I said no to grabbing a beer with the guys from the station. The total at the bottom of the last page was written in thick black ink. $2,340. That was my Outer Banks fund. My best friend and coworker, Mark, and I had been planning this trip since July. An oceanfront cabin. No sirens. No pagers. No screaming nephews and nieces. Just the sound of the Atlantic Ocean and cold beers on a wooden porch. I traced the numbers with my thumb. Why was I always the one making sacrifices? It hadn't happened overnight. It was a slow, creeping erosion of my boundaries. I leaned my head back, closing my eyes, and the memories came flooding in. The ghosts of Christmas past. Started 4 years ago. Kevin and Tina only had 3 kids back then. On Christmas Eve, my mother pulled me aside into the kitchen. She had that soft, pleading voice she uses when she's trying to trap you. "Nicholas, honey," she had said, "Tina is just exhausted. Can you just watch the kids for a few hours tomorrow morning so they can sleep in?" A few hours. That was the bait. I agreed, wanting to be a good uncle, a good son. A few hours turned into 14 hours. Kevin and Tina left the house at 9 a.m. and didn't come back until 11 p.m. They went to a movie, had a long lunch, and went shopping. Meanwhile, I spent the entire Christmas day breaking up fights, cleaning up spilled juice, and rocking a screaming toddler while my mother watched Hallmark movies in the other room, telling me I was doing a great job building character. The next year, the roster expanded. For kids. This time, they didn't even pretend it was for a few hours. They just assumed. And then came last year. The absolute breaking point. Last Christmas, Kevin and Tina dumped all 5 kids at my mother's house on December 23rd and vanished to Tina's parents' house 3 hours away. My mother, conveniently, suddenly developed terrible back pain and locked herself in her bedroom, leaving me entirely alone with a preschooler, a toddler, and 3 infants. On Christmas Eve at 10 p.m., baby Noah spiked a fever of 103 degrees. He was burning up, thrashing, and screaming a horrible, raw sound. Panicked, I called Kevin. It went straight to voicemail. I called Tina. Voicemail. I knocked on my mother's door. She yelled through the wood, "Just give him Tylenol, Nicholas. I'm trying to sleep. I am a trained medical professional, and I knew a 103 fever in an infant required immediate attention." I had to bundle all 5 screaming, crying children into my small car in the freezing snow. I drove carefully but quickly to the nearest urgent care clinic. I sat in a brightly lit, sterile waiting room for 4 hours on Christmas Eve, holding a burning baby, while the other 4 kids destroyed the waiting room magazines. When we finally saw the doctor, it was a severe double ear infection. The receptionist handed me the bill. Since I wasn't the legal guardian and didn't have their insurance cards, because Kevin couldn't be bothered to leave them, I had to pay out of pocket. $180. That was a massive chunk of my weekly grocery budget. I paid it without hesitation because it was about the kids' health. When Kevin and Tina finally strolled into the house on December 26th, looking rested and tanned, I handed Kevin the receipt. Noah had a bad infection. I had to take him to urgent care. It was $180, I said quietly, expecting him to immediately pull out his wallet. Kevin barely glanced at the paper. He swiped it off the counter and stuffed it into his pocket. "Man, you shouldn't have panicked. Kids get fevers all the time. But hey, thanks for stepping up. You're a lifesaver." He never paid me back. Not a dime. Instead, Tina reached into her designer shopping bag and handed me a gift wrapped in cheap paper. "We got you something from the boutique in town. Merry late Christmas." I opened it in my kitchen later that night. It was a vanilla-scented candle with a bright yellow clearance sticker still stuck to the bottom. $12. That was my reward for 3 days of hell, a medical emergency, and $180 of my own money. A discounted candle. I remember a few years ago when my Uncle Ray's brother passed away. The funeral logistics were a nightmare. Who did they call to organize the catering, set up the chairs in the rain, and drive the elderly relatives around? Me. Because Kevin was too busy with work. Sitting in my quiet apartment, looking at my hard-earned savings, the anger solidified into something cold and hard. I grabbed my phone and dialed Mark's number. He answered on the second ring. "Hey man, just finished a brutal shift. What's up?" Mark's voice was rough with exhaustion. "We are going to the Outer Banks, Mark," I said, my voice completely steady. "I don't care what happens. I'm not canceling." Mark chuckled softly on the other end. "Good, because I wasn't going to let you. It's time you stopped letting them treat you like the hired help." The next couple of weeks were a masterclass in psychological warfare. December rolled in, bringing frost to the windshields and a barrage of notifications to my phone. I continued to work my EMT shifts, keeping my head down, administering oxygen, and doing chest compressions, while my personal life slowly turned into a pressure cooker. One Tuesday evening, I was in the break room at the station, warming up a bowl of leftover chili, when my phone buzzed with an incoming call. I looked at the screen. Aunt Pauline. Aunt Pauline is my mother's younger sister. She's a retired school teacher, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who lives about 2 hours away. She usually only shows up to major holidays, sits quietly, observes everything, and leaves early. We weren't incredibly close, so a random Tuesday call was unusual. I answered, stepping out into the chilly ambulance bay. "Hey, Aunt Pauline, is everything okay?" "Hello, Nicholas." Her voice was crisp, clear, and carried a tone of serious intent. "I'm calling because I need to talk to you about this Christmas nonsense." I sighed, rubbing the bridge of my nose. "Did Mom call you?" "Look, I'm not changing my mind." "No, Linda didn't call me," Pauline interrupted sharply. I'm calling because I've been sitting in that ridiculous family group chat for 3 years. I have my phone on silent, but I read every single thing your mother and your brother post in there. And frankly, Nicholas, it makes me sick. My stomach tightened. What do you mean? Your mother thinks she's a strategic genius, but she's just a bully, Pauline said, her voice dropping an octave. I want you to know that choosing yourself is not a betrayal of this family. Do not let them guilt you into staying. Go on your trip. And Nicholas. Yeah. Read the chat history. Read what they say about you when they think you aren't paying attention. I've been taking screenshots for a long time. It's time you saw the truth. She hung up before I could ask any more questions. I stood in the cold air, the ambulance sirens wailing in the distance. I pulled up the family group chat on my phone. It was called Mercer Family Updates. I usually just muted it because it was mostly Tina posting pictures of her kids' organic lunches or Kevin bragging about his golf swing. I scrolled back, further back, past Thanksgiving, back to last Christmas, back to the night I was sitting in the urgent care waiting room with baby Noah. I found a conversation thread between my mother and Kevin. Mom, Dec 24th, 10:15 p.m. Nicholas is at the clinic with Noah. I told him to just give the baby Tylenol, but he always overreacts. He's so dramatic. Kevin, Dec 24th, 10:20 p.m. LOL. Let him do it. Saves us a trip. Besides, he's fine. He likes feeling needed. It gives him something to do. My breath caught in my throat. He likes feeling needed. I scrolled further up to a conversation from just a few weeks ago, right after I left the Thanksgiving table. Tina, November 28th, 8 p.m. Is Nick really serious about going to the beach? Who is going to watch the kids? We already paid the deposit. Mom, November 28th, 8:05 p.m. Oh, don't worry about Nicholas. He'll cave. He always does. Honestly, Nicholas doesn't have a real life anyway. He should be grateful we include him in our holidays at all. Kevin, November 28th, 8:10 p.m. exactly. The guy makes barely above minimum wage driving an ambulance. Staying at the house is basically a vacation for him anyway. Plus, with my promotion, I need this break. He'll fall in line. I stared at the glowing screen until my eyes burned. The betrayal didn't feel like a sharp stab. It felt like a heavy, suffocating blanket of toxic sludge. They didn't love me. They didn't even respect me. They viewed me as a pathetic, lonely loser who should be honored to serve as their free labor. My mother, the woman who raised me, thought I was a pathetic charity case. Suddenly, my phone vibrated in my hand. A new text message. A private message from Tina. Tina. Hey Nick. So excited for Christmas. Hey, I know you were talking about some beach trip, but Kevin and I are really counting on you. Kev has been so stressed with work and his promotion, he really needs this. We know how much you love the kids. It would break their hearts if Uncle Nick wasn't there to open presents with them. See you on the 23rd. Hugs and kisses. It was a masterstroke of emotional manipulation. Guilt, flattery, and a complete disregard for my boundaries, all wrapped up in a passive-aggressive hugs and kisses. If I had received this text yesterday, I might have felt a twinge of guilt. I might have considered compromising. But reading it right after seeing her call me a pathetic loser in the group chat, I felt nothing but a cold, hard disgust. The sheer hypocrisy of it made my skin crawl. I didn't type a furious reply. I didn't call her out. I simply locked my phone, put it in my pocket, and walked back into the station. I threw my half-eaten chili in the trash. I had clarity now. Total, absolute clarity. There would be no compromises. There would be no negotiations. I was going to let them drive off a cliff of their own making, and I wasn't going to hit the brakes for them. The week leading up to Christmas felt like moving through water. Everything was quiet on my end, but I could feel the storm brewing just over the horizon. I worked my final shifts at the clinic. Dr. Nguyen, my supervisor, pulled me aside on my last day. Nicholas, you've put in an insane amount of hours this year, Dr. Nguyen said, patting me on the shoulder. Enjoy your time off. Don't answer your phone. Get some rest. Thank you, document. I plan on it. I smiled, feeling a genuine sense of anticipation for the first time in years. At home, I packed my bags in complete silence. Just me, the hum of the old radiator, and the satisfaction of placing swim trunks and sunglasses into a duffel bag while the temperature outside dropped to 20 degrees. I packed my favorite books, comfortable hoodies, and my camera. Meanwhile, the Mercer family updates chat was a non-stop stream of assumptions. My mother posted pictures of the guest room she had prepared for me, which was actually just a deflated air mattress thrown on the floor of the kids' playroom. Kevin posted a screenshot of the weather forecast for their luxury mountain resort. Tina kept dropping little reminders about feeding schedules and where the emergency inhalers were kept. I didn't reply to a single message. I just opened them, left them on read, and went back to packing. I was operating in the eye of the storm, the terrifying, peaceful center right before the hurricane rips the roof off. At 4 a.m. on December 23rd, my alarm went off. I didn't groan. I leaped out of bed. I took a quick shower, grabbed my duffel bag, and walked out the door. Mark was waiting in his Jeep in the parking lot, 2 steaming cups of diner coffee in the cup holders. Ready to become a fugitive? Mark grinned, putting the Jeep in drive. Hit the gas, I said. The airport was a chaotic mess of holiday travelers, but I moved through it like a ghost. I felt completely detached from the stress around me. We checked our bags, went through security, and found our gate. At 6:30 a.m., we boarded the plane. As the plane accelerated down the runway and the wheels lifted off the tarmac, I looked out the window. Down there, in the sprawling Virginia suburbs, the sun was just starting to rise. And down there, my family was waking up to a reality they had never bothered to prepare for. We landed in North Carolina just past 8 a.m. The air was crisp, tasting of salt and freedom. We picked up our rental car and started the drive out to the Outer Banks. That was when I turned my phone's cellular data back on. It was like detonating a digital bomb. My phone vibrated so hard and fast in my hand I almost dropped it. The screen lit up with a terrifying cascade of notifications. 14 missed calls from Mom. 8 missed calls from Kevin. 5 missed calls from Tina. 47 new messages in Mercer family updates. I opened the chat. The timeline of their panic was beautifully documented. Mom, 7 a.m. Nicholas. Kevin is dropping the kids off in an hour. Are you on your way? Kevin, 7:45 a.m. Hey bro, we're at Mom's. Where are you? We have a 10 a.m. flight to catch. Mom, 8:15 a.m. Nicholas Robert Mercer. Answer your phone this instant. This isn't funny. Tina, 8:30 a.m. Nick. Seriously? You are holding up our vacation. Get here now. Kevin, 8:45 a.m. If you don't show up in 10 minutes. I swear to God. I sat in the passenger seat of the rental car, watching the ocean roll by out the window. Mark glanced over at me. Everything blowing up? Like the 4th of July, I said softly. Just then, an incoming call took over the screen. Mom. I took a deep breath, letting the ocean air fill my lungs. I swiped the green button and put the phone to my ear. Nicholas. My mother's voice was a hysterical screech that actually hurt my eardrum. Where on earth are you? Kevin is going to miss his flight. The kids are running around destroying my living room. You get here right now. I kept my voice incredibly calm, completely flat. I'm not coming, Mom. Dead silence on the other end. Just the sound of 5 kids screaming in the background. What do you mean you're not coming? She stammered, the rage replaced by sudden, genuine confusion. I told you at Thanksgiving. I had plans. I bought my tickets months ago. I am currently in a rental car driving down the coast of the Outer Banks. You boarded a plane? She gasped, as if I had just confessed to a major crime. You can't do this. You are abandoning your family. Nicholas, turn around and come back right now. Have a Merry Christmas, Mom, I said. Nicholas, don't you dare hang up on. I tapped the red button. The call ended. I turned on Do Not Disturb mode, slipped the phone into my jacket pocket, and rolled the window down. The cold wind hit my face, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt like I could actually breathe. The storm had officially made landfall, and I was thousands of miles away from the wreckage. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in living well. Mark and I settled into the beachfront cabin. We drank beers on the porch, watched the waves crash against the shoreline, and ate massive plates of fresh seafood. I slept for 10 straight hours the first night. No screaming babies, no demands, but I knew the finale was coming. Every Christmas Day, at exactly 3 p.m., the extended Mercer family does a massive Zoom video call. It started during the pandemic and just became a tradition. Aunts, uncles, cousins. Everyone logs on for an hour of forced cheer. At 2:55 p.m. on Christmas Day, I sat on the wooden porch of the cabin, the ocean roaring majestically behind me. I opened my laptop and clicked the Zoom link. The screen populated with little squares. Uncle Ray and Aunt Donna in their immaculate living room. Cousin Greg looking hungover in his college dorm. And then, the main event, my mother's living room. It was a scene of absolute devastation. The perfectly staged house looked like it had been ransacked by raccoons. Wrapping paper was shredded everywhere. Ethan was crying loudly in the corner. My mother looked haggard, her hair messy, bags under her eyes. Next to her on the sofa sat Kevin and Tina. They looked miserable. They hadn't made their flight. They lost the money. When my square popped up on the screen, showing me relaxed, tanned, and sitting on a beach, the virtual room went dead silent. My mother's eyes locked onto the screen. Her face contorted into a mask of pure victimhood. She immediately started sobbing. Fake, theatrical sobs. "Look who decided to show up," Kevin sneered, his face red with rage. "The prodigal son. Hope you're enjoying your little beach trip while you ruined our entire Christmas. You selfish prick." Kevin language, Aunt Donna gasped. "No, Donna, let him speak," my mother wailed, dabbing her dry eyes with a tissue. "Nicholas abandoned us. He lied to us, packed his bags, and left us stranded with 5 children on Christmas Eve. I have been up for 2 days straight." Kevin lost $1,600 on a non-refundable resort because his own brother stabbed him in the back. "That's awful," Cousin Greg chimed in, shaking his head. "Nick, man, that's incredibly cold. Family comes first." I sat there, perfectly still, letting them dig their graves. "I didn't lie," I said calmly. "I told you at Thanksgiving I had plans. You just chose to ignore me and demanded I work as a free nanny." "You are a part of this family," my mother screamed. "You owe us. We raised you. You have no idea what it means to sacrifice." Before I could say another word, a new square lit up with a green border. It was Aunt Pauline. She was sitting in her home office, wearing a sharp blazer, adjusting her reading glasses. She looked like a judge about to hand down a sentence. "Linda, shut your mouth," Pauline said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it possessed a terrifying authority that silenced the entire call immediately. "Pauline, excuse me?" my mother gasped, clutching her pearls. I said, "Shut your mouth, Linda. I am sick to my stomach watching you play the victim," Pauline stated, leaning closer to her webcam. "And Kevin, you arrogant little boy, you have some nerve calling your brother selfish." "Aunt Pauline, you don't know the whole story," Kevin started. "I know exactly what the story is, Kevin," Pauline interrupted, holding up her smartphone to the camera. "Because unlike the rest of the family, I have been reading the Mercer Family Updates group chat. I've been watching how you two talk about Nicholas when you think nobody is paying attention. And since you want to talk about family values on Christmas, let's share with the class, shall we?" My mother's face went from pale to ghostly white. "Pauline, don't you dare." "Oh, I'm daring," Pauline said fiercely. She tapped her screen and began reading aloud. Her enunciation was perfect. Every word landed like a sledgehammer. "Nicholas is so dramatic. He likes feeling needed. It gives him something to do." Pauline read, mimicking Kevin's arrogant tone. She swiped to the next screenshot. "He makes barely above minimum wage. Staying at the house is basically a vacation for him anyway. He'll fall in line. Aunt Donna let out an audible gasp. Uncle Ray took off his glasses, rubbing his eyes in disbelief. Cousin Greg suddenly looked very interested in his shoes. And my personal favorite, Pauline continued. Her eyes locked onto my mother's terrified face. Nicholas doesn't have a real life anyway. He should be grateful we include him in our holidays at all. Written by you, Linda, his own mother. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the kind of silence that rings in your ears. You could hear a pin drop in 16 different households across the country. Kevin opened his mouth like a suffocating fish, looking at Tina for backup, but Tina was staring at the floor, mortified. Then something unprecedented happened. In my mother's square, a figure stepped out from the background shadows. It was my dad, Robert. For 28 years, I had never heard the man raise his voice. He walked right up to the camera, standing behind my mother. His face was dark red, a vein bulging on his forehead. Is that true, Linda? My dad's voice boomed, shaking the microphone. Did you write those things about our son? Robert, I was just venting. It was taken out of context. She stammered, actually shrinking away from him. Out of context. My dad slammed his hand down on the coffee table. The kids in the room screamed. You treat him like a servant. You let Kevin treat him like trash. No wonder he got on a plane. I'm ashamed of you, Linda. I am ashamed of both of you. The entire family watched in stunned silence as my dad turned his back on them and walked out of the frame. I looked into the camera. My heart was pounding, but my voice was completely steady. I spent 4 years sacrificing my time, my money, and my sanity because I thought that's what family did. But you don't want a son, Mom. You want an unpaid employee. And Kevin, you don't want a brother. You want a servant. Well, I quit. I leaned in closer to the screen. I am just done being the person who gives up his life so everyone else can enjoy theirs. If you ever want a relationship with me moving forward, you will treat me with respect. Until then, lose my number. I didn't wait for a response. I clicked the red Leave Meeting button. The screen went black. I sat back in my chair on the porch. The laptop closed in front of me. The Atlantic Ocean continued to crash against the shore, indifferent to the massive emotional explosion that had just occurred. I took a deep breath. I expected to feel guilty. I expected the old conditioning to kick in, that nagging voice telling me I was a bad son, a bad brother. But it didn't come. Instead, I felt an overwhelming sense of lightness. It was as if a 100-pound lead vest had been unbuckled and dropped from my shoulders. Mark walked out onto the porch holding 2 cold beers. He handed me one and leaned against the wooden railing, looking out at the water. So, Mark said, taking a sip, how did it go? I cracked the beer open. Aunt Pauline dropped the nuclear codes. Dad actually yelled. And I walked away. Mark grinned, clinking his bottle against mine. To walking away. To walking away, I echoed. For the rest of the evening, my phone was strangely quiet. The Mercer family updates chat, usually buzzing with complaints and photos, was completely dead. It was a digital graveyard. I could only imagine the horrific, awkward tension radiating through my mother's house. The golden child exposed, the manipulative mother caught red-handed, and the passive father finally drawing a line. Around 8 p.m., I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. I pulled it out. It wasn't a text message or a missed call. It was an email notification from Venmo. Kevin Mercer has sent you $180. Note, blank. I stared at the screen and actually let out a loud, barking laugh. $180. The exact amount of the urgent care bill from the year before. He didn't text an apology. He didn't call to explain himself. He just quietly transferred the money he owed me in the middle of the night, a pathetic, cowardly acknowledgement of his guilt. The golden child was finally forced to pay his own debts. A few hours later, another notification popped up. A private text message from Aunt Pauline. Aunt Pauline, just wanted to let you know, Kevin and Tina packed up the kids and left the house an hour ago. Your mother is locked in her room crying. Your father is sitting in the living room watching the game with a beer. Proud of you, kid. Enjoy the beach. I smiled in the dark. The natural order of things had been completely disrupted. The bullies had been confronted, not with screaming or violence, but with the cold, hard reality of their own words. I spent the next 4 days actually living. I didn't check my phone. I didn't worry about feeding schedules or whether my mother was going to guilt-trip me about not visiting enough. Mark and I went fishing, we ate terrible junk food, and we talked about the future. For the first time, I felt like my future actually belonged to me. It wasn't mortgaged to my family's needs. When the trip was over and we packed up the rental car to head back to the airport, I took one last look at the ocean. I had arrived in the Outer Banks as an exhausted, underappreciated doormat. I was leaving as a man with a spine. The flight back was easy. When I unlocked the door to my tiny apartment, it didn't feel cramped or lonely anymore. It felt like a sanctuary. It was mine, paid for by my hard work, my salary, my late nights. No trust funds, no handouts, just honest living. I unpacked my bags, threw a load of laundry in the wash, and ordered a giant pizza just for myself. I sat on my couch, eating hot pizza straight out of the box, watching a stupid action movie. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was my dad. I picked it up. "Hey, Dad." "Hey, kiddo." His voice was gruff, tired, but warm. "Just wanted to make sure you made it back safe." "I did. Thanks, Dad." There was a long pause on the line. "I'm sorry, Nicholas," he said softly. "I let it go on too long. I wanted to keep the peace, and I ended up letting them walk all over you. I should have been a better father. I should have defended you." Hearing my dad apologize, sincerely apologize, cracked something open inside me. The anger melted away, leaving a sense of profound relief. "It's okay, Dad. It's done now. We move forward." "We move forward," he agreed. "I love you, son." "Love you too, Dad." I hung up the phone. The storm had passed. The wreckage was still smoldering, but the air was finally clear. The transition back to reality was surprisingly smooth. 2 weeks had passed since the explosive Christmas Zoom call. January brought freezing rain and a mountain of emergency calls, but I walked into the EMT station every morning with a renewed sense of purpose. My posture was straighter. My mind was clearer. Dr. Nguyen noticed it immediately. "Whatever happened on that beach, Mercer, I prescribe it to you every 6 months." He joked as I handed him a perfectly charted patient report. "You're operating at 110%. I smiled. "Just dropped some dead weight, document. That's all." While my life was moving forward, Kevin's was crashing into the reality of consequences. Through the family grapevine, mostly via Aunt Donna, who couldn't keep a secret if her life depended on it, I learned about the chaos unfolding in my brother's perfect world. Without me there to act as their free, on-demand childcare, Kevin and Tina were forced to face the reality of having 5 children. They couldn't just drop the kids off at my mom's house anymore, because my dad had explicitly forbidden it. He told my mother that if she wanted to see the grandkids, she could visit them at Kevin's house, but his home was no longer a free daycare center. This meant Kevin and Tina had to hire a professional nanny, a real, certified nanny who demanded $20 an hour, overtime pay, and weekends off. Suddenly, the money they had been saving by exploiting me was evaporating. Aunt Donna gleefully informed me that Kevin was complaining loudly to anyone who would listen about how expensive it is to raise a family these days. The irony was delicious. The shiny new Porsche Macan sitting in his driveway suddenly looked less like a trophy and more like a financial liability. Rumor had it that Tina had even threatened Kevin with a lawyer and divorce papers if he didn't start helping out more around the house, now that the Nicholas safety net was gone. The golden child was finally experiencing the real world. And then, on a random Thursday afternoon, 10 days after the new year, my phone rang. It was my mother. I stared at the caller ID. I let it ring 3 times, debating whether to answer. Finally, I swiped green. I was strong enough now to handle whatever manipulation she had planned. "Hello," I said, my voice neutral. "Nicholas," my mother said. Her voice was incredibly small. It lacked the usual commanding edge. She sounded frail, old. Please don't hang up. I'm listening. I heard a shaky intake of breath on the other end of the line. I don't know how to say this. I've spent the last 2 weeks being very angry. At you, at Pauline, at your father. I blamed everyone else. She paused, and I could hear her crying softly. But your father sat me down. We had a very long, very hard talk. And he made me look at what I've been doing. I stayed silent. I wasn't going to make this easy for her by jumping in with comfort. I was wrong, Nicholas, she choked out. The words seemed to physically pain her to say. I was so wrong. I took you for granted. I treated you terribly. I thought because you were always so capable, so independent, that you didn't need me to take care of you. And I let Kevin take advantage of you. I'm so deeply sorry. I am ashamed of the things I wrote in that chat. I closed my eyes. Hearing the apology was surreal. It was what I had wanted for years, but now that it was here, it felt heavy. Mom, I started, keeping my tone firm but not cruel. You didn't just take me for granted. You treated me like I was worthless. You told the family I had no life. You made me feel like I had to earn my place in this family by being useful to Kevin. I know, she sobbed. I know, and I hate myself for it. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I don't expect things to go back to normal. I needed you to know that I know I was wrong. And I want to try to be better. If you'll let me. I looked around my small apartment. It wasn't a mansion, but it was built on respect and hard work. I didn't need her validation anymore. But holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. I appreciate the apology, Mom. I really do, I said. But things are going to change. Drastically. I am not the default babysitter. I am not the family handyman. If I come to visit, I am coming as a guest. As a son. And if I am ever spoken to like a servant again, I will walk out the door and I won't come back. Are we clear? Yes, she said quickly, desperately. Yes, Nicholas. Completely clear. Okay, I said. We can start slow. I'll call you next week. Thank you, Nicholas. I love you. Goodbye, Mom. I hung up the phone. It wasn't a movie ending where everyone hugged and cried and everything was instantly fixed. It was messy, it was awkward, and it required a lot of boundary setting. But it was real. It was a foundation built on truth, rather than toxic obligation. It's been a few months since that chaotic Christmas. Spring has finally broken through the Virginia chill, bringing green leaves and longer days. My life looks very different now, not because my circumstances changed, but because I changed how I allow people to treat me. Last Sunday, I drove to my parents' house for dinner. It was the first time I had been back since Thanksgiving. I pulled into the driveway and parked my old Civic. Kevin's Porsche wasn't there. He and Tina were at home, dealing with a nanny calling in sick. I walked through the front door. The house smelled like roast chicken and garlic. My mom came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. She looked nervous, hesitant, like she was walking on eggshells. Nicholas, you made it, she smiled, giving me a brief, careful hug. Hey, Mom. Smells good, I said. I walked into the dining room. The table was set, but this time it was different. There were no plastic sippy cups. There were no laminated schedules. The table was set for exactly 3 people. Me, my mom, and my dad. My dad came in from the garage, wiping grease off his hands, and gave me a firm pat on the back. Good to see you, son. Grab a beer. Game's about to start. We sat down to eat. It was quiet. It was peaceful. We talked about my work at the station, about the upcoming baseball season, about my dad's garden. Nobody asked me to fix a sink. Nobody asked me to watch a screaming toddler. I was just a son having dinner with his parents. I stayed for exactly 2 hours. I had set a silent alarm on my phone. When it vibrated in my pocket, I stood up, helped clear my plate, and said my goodbyes. My mother didn't beg me to stay. She didn't try to guilt me into doing a chore. She just said, "Drive safe, Nicholas. We loved having you." Driving home that evening, Watching the sunset paint the sky in strokes of orange and purple, I did a lot of reflecting. For 28 years, I believed a lie. I believed that love meant making yourself useful. I believed that if I stopped helping, if I stopped sacrificing my own time and money, I would stop mattering to the people I cared about. I thought my worth was tied to how many problems I could solve for them. But sitting on that porch in the Outer Banks, watching my family unravel because I simply refused to be a doormat, I realized the absolute truth. The people who only value you when you are useful do not value you at all. They value what you do for them. Real family, real love, doesn't demand that you set yourself on fire to keep them warm. It doesn't ask you to empty your bank account to pay for their mistakes while they buy luxury cars. It doesn't demand that you give up your holidays, your peace, and your sanity just to make their lives more convenient. I had to be willing to lose my family in order to save myself. And in doing so, I forced them to either respect me or let me go. Kevin chose to hold onto his ego, and we haven't spoken since. But my parents chose to adapt. It's a fragile peace, and it takes work every single day to enforce those boundaries. But it's a peace I can live with. If you are the person in your family who always says yes, if you are the one who cancels your own plans, who covers the costs, who watches the kids, who sets the table and cleans it up while everyone else watches TV. If nobody ever stops to ask what you need, I just want you to know this. You are allowed to stop. You are allowed to put down the burden. Not because you don't love them, but because you love yourself enough to finally take up space in your own life. You are not a supporting character in someone else's movie. You are the main character of your own. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope this story resonated with you in some way. Have you ever been in a similar situation where your kindness was taken advantage of? Please share your story in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on future content.